It's March 1979. Idi Amin's regime is fading like a lustre of an evening sky. Tanzanian troops have seized Mbarara, a town in the southwestern part of Uganda. Following Amin's downfall, the persecution of Ugandan Muslims kicks off. In the village of Kiziba in western Uganda, a hostile group of Protestants visit Idi Tamzade's home. They are here to celebrate the downfall of Amin. At the home, Idi Tamzade and his son Mansour Mutebi, Mustafa Mabuye and Abdallah Chegombe are gruesomely hacked to death. For 2 months, the murderers guard the crime scene to ensure the victims are not laid to rest. It is only with the intervention of the chief Qadi Sheikh Kasim Mulumba that the 4 bodies of the deceased are secured and finally laid to rest. The 1979 massacre of Muslims in western Uganda has begun, where over 70 innocent Ugandans will be gruesomely killed while hundreds will flee, bringing with them tales of the massacre. But how well do we know about this incident? And how does it explain the continued persecution of Ugandan Muslims in Uganda today? First, let us take a closer look at how Islam spread to western Uganda, that is, Ankole region. And for this we have to travel back in time to the 19th century towards the end. The year is 1889. The kingdom of Uganda is engulfed in a civil war between the Muslims, the Protestants, the Catholics, as well as the traditionalists. Defeated, the Muslims flee and settle in Bukunga, an area at the very end of Ankole Kingdom. In Bukunga, they built a mosque and a primary school before Christianity could even set foot in the area. It is these Muslims that would spread Islam in the area. Later, as the British expanded their influence to Ankole, they used Muslim traders and chiefs as interpreters and clerks, enabling the further spread of the religion. However, despite this advantage, the religion did not gain a significant following in Ankole. But why? Well, first, Muslims did not have dedicated missionaries, nor did they regard themselves as such. They were more interested in trading and settling in the area rather than converting people to the faith. However, a major reason is that the Baganda did not fully assimilate into Ankole. As a result, they retained their language, culture, traditions, and norms to this day. Now, while this was a good thing in terms of identity, it was not the most effective way of spreading the religion, and so the Banyankole did not find it appealing. The few Banyankole who converted to Islam adopted the Chiganda culture and language in which Islam expressed itself. Now, this ensured a peaceful coexistence even when Christianity came into play later on. Fast forward, when Idi Amin took power in January 1972, Muslims in Ankole began to receive some favors, like being invited to state functions, while others got positions as administrators in a Christian majority area, something they could only dream of in the previous regime. A series of Muslim festivities such as the Maulid were also popular in the region, leading to massive conversions. This did not settle down well with the Christians, especially the Protestants, who believed that Ankole was a Christian kingdom. The fear was that Amin would try to Islamize the region by favoring and spreading Islam in the area that had been predominantly Christian. And so the Christians began growing discontented because of all this. This also explains why Amin's regime was initially opposed in this region. By 1979, the Christian church in Ankole was accused of colluding with the invading forces. When the Tanzanian forces began liberating parts of Ankole bordering Tanzania, it confirmed Idi Amin's suspicions that the churches in the area were aiding the rebels. Suspicion arose along religious lines, where Christians looked at Muslims as collaborators with Amin's government, and Amin looked at Christians as collaborators with the rebels. So when state crackdown and imprisonments began, Protestants always suspected Muslims to be spies and informers of the Idi Amin government. In February 1979, Mbarara would be captured, and the capital Kampala would follow 1 month later. Following Amin's fall, many Christians in Ankole looted towns and religious institutions like churches. However, the treatment they would give Muslims would be more severe. During the mob's interaction with the Muslims, they offered them 3 options. 1. You must leave. 2. You must pay a ransom within 2 weeks of a cow and 2 jerrycans of a local beer. Number 3. Face it rough. Several Muslims would pay the ransom with cows and local beer. But those who did not comply and stayed, their houses would be burned, gardens and plantations destroyed, as well as livestock killed. By June 1979, the newly installed government in Kampala had been in power for 2 months under Yusuf Lule. The new president, Yusuf Lule, had converted from Islam to Christianity, to Protestantism to be exact, to be admitted to King's College Vuto. It is in this government also that Yoweri Kaguta Museveni would serve as the Minister of Defense. Around this time, Muslim leaders and factions were also fighting for control and dominance under the new administration. As this took place in Kampala, on the 25th of June 1979, 295 miles south of Kampala, in the town of Itendero, was a man that would change and alter the fate of Muslims in the region. He led a team of Christians who moved around harassing and collecting ransoms from Muslims in the area. This guy was feared by his victims and counterparts. Through his work, he had amassed a fortune for himself. On this particular day, his boys show up at his house to talk over the day's plans. They find Fenekansi Kamisha dead. Now, without any evidence, the Christian mob knows exactly who to blame, and they have to avenge Kamisha's death. In this same area, 2 months earlier in April 1979, Edward Lulangalanga, a member of the Uganda National Liberation Front, UNLF, addressed a rally where he told a gathering that Tutemire omukiri aharimwe kukongora amaraji, which literally meant that we have felled the tree and it is up to you to cut off the branches. Now, according to the Protestants in the area, Amin was the tree and Muslims were the branches. So with Fenekasi's murder, it was time to hatch a plan of revenge. In a meeting, the mob agreed to round up every Muslim in the region, including women and children, and take them to River Rizi for execution. Those who disagreed with the plan suggested that let us take them to the police and let the law handle their case. Unfortunately, these were the minority. In their best effort, they leaked the proposed plan of action to their Muslim friends. A significant number of Muslims would depart, leaving behind children, the elderly, and women. In the early morning of the 26th of June 1979, a mob of Protestants, led by Buchuku, Kamugisha, Reizeire, armed with spears, machetes, knives, and ropes, moved house to house, rounding up every Muslim they came across. The arresting officials informed the Muslims that they were being detained on the orders of Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, the then Minister of Defense. When one is arrested, they are beaten, hands tied behind their backs, forced to line up and walk as they head to the next house. After combing the entire area, they gather the Muslims at the home of the Imam, known as Abdallah Seggolorigamba. From here, they march to River Rizi. At the river, children, pregnant women, and the elderly people stood side by side with no idea why they had been arrested or what was about to happen. Reality only struck when weapons were drawn and the gruesome hacking began. People pleaded to spare their kids, but to no avail. Others would offer themselves to save their wives, but with no mercy. One after the other would be executed. In the chaos, the few lucky ones threw themselves in the river and drowned. One of the victims' head was cut into 3 pieces before being tossed into the river. Other cases included mutilation of the hands and legs before being thrown into the river to drown. There was no mercy for the 75-year-old Imam, Abdallah Seggolorigamba. He was savagely hacked with a machete and thrown into the river. Madia Natende, at just 27 years and 7 months pregnant, standing next to Line to face the blade, thought that maybe she would be spared. Or if it had come to the worst, she would just be thrown into the river without a painful death. Behind her was her mother, worried and distraught about what was to happen to her pregnant daughter. Right there, they slit her stomach open and ripped out the fetus of the unborn baby before cutting Madia with a machete and throwing her into the river. As she touched the bottom of the river, her unborn baby followed. Seeing this cruelty, Madia's mother jumps into the water before being hacked and survives to retell the story until the end of her life. A group of Muslim researchers who documented the massacre said that 64 people were killed at the river. However, only 36 bodies were recovered. They would be laid to rest in mass graves at Nyamitanga Mosque in Mbarara. After the killings at River Rizi, Muslims in Ankole lived in perpetual fear. Over 200 Muslims were being imprisoned between May and July 1979. Those who survived were forced to drink alcohol, eat pork, or pay heavy fines. Most of the survivors fled the area and settled in Chazanga in Masaka district, leaving their land to be occupied by their tormentors. When the NRM government headed by Museveni, who was implicated in the massacre, set up the Human Rights Commission to address the issue, the commission made sure that there was no Muslim representation in a discussion of the Muslim matter. Yoweri Museveni, who was implicated by the testimonies, also made sure that his testimony was done in secret in a closed session, and yet this was an issue for all Ugandans. However, in his testimonies, he implicated Edward Lulangalanga as the one responsible for directing these murders. Unfortunately, Edward Lulangalanga was not summoned to appear before the commission to testify. In the aftermath of the massacre, Lulangalanga assumed offices of responsibility in the Obote II government. Upon his death in 2017, he denied that his statements about cutting the branches were misunderstood by the people, and that all he meant by the branches and the tree, you know the metaphor, the tree he says he meant Amin, and then the branches he meant Aminism. Although some would like to paint the execution of Muslims in Ankole as a political issue and blame it on Amin, in no way, shape or form was it. It was pure murder, given that most of the victims were very old men and women, others were children, who may not have benefited from Amin's regime any more than the Christians. Take an example of Abubakar Katongole, who was 80 years old. Segulu Ligamba, the Imam, was 75 years old. Halima Nabatanzi was 80 years old. Aisha Katende was 85 years old. Nuriyat Namakula was 2 years old. Hamida Nansamba was 18 months old. Most of the children were under the ages of 5. Although Amin was a Muslim, it is wrong to assume that Islam guided his activities or that the whole Muslim community took part in formulating his policies. The killing and displacement of these people was political revenge and sectarianism unleashed unjustly on a group of people who had suffered because of Amin. Also, why has Museveni been silent about this issue? Is it a past that he doesn't want to be uncovered? In his 36 years in power, he has made countless speeches. How come he never mentions or references this particular incident? Was this terrorism? If Uganda has a terror problem, wouldn't it be logical enough to use the 1979 massacre as an example of terror? Or that example doesn't count because the people murdered were Muslims? Museveni has always claimed that he is against sectarianism. There is nothing more sectarian than this incident. However, he still refuses to mention it, and yet he was a high-ranking minister in Yusuf Olule's government at the time as the Minister of Defense. What is interesting is that the international human rights organizations or the media never picked up interest in this story. The story got suppressed. However, thanks to Muslim scholars who took time to document this whole episode in our history, So does Museveni feel guilty because he should have done better to stop this and didn't? Or does he simply hate Muslims, given that there is a continued persecution and profiling of Muslims in Uganda today? Museveni has boasted of revenge in public and even said that he named his son Muhoozi to avenge him in case anything happened to him. Was this an act of revenge for Museveni? Well, the truth is, at the moment, we will never know.